Let's move on to the Senate, actually, because on the state level, you're getting to something that's really important. As a reminder, this is going behind the paywall, guys. You'll be able to watch it later, but for our premium subscribers, they can continue watching.
It's going to be good stuff, so you better,
it is great stuff.
Better subscribe.
Thank you, Ryan. Let's go ahead and put your forecast up on the screen here, Logan. So you have a race to the White House for the Senate. Explain what we are looking at here in terms of safety, safe R, and some of those lighter states, and which way that you think that they're going to go. Go ahead.
Well, I would just say the framework in the beginning is if Democrats win the White House, they need 50 seats because just like last time around with Vice President Harris, it'd be Tim Walz acting as the tiebreaker. Republicans only need 50 if they win the White House. If Republicans win the White House, th've probably got it locked down because West Virginia is going to be a flip for them. But if Democrats win the White House, they have a shot here, right? So when I'm talking about, as you asked about what these races meetings, what the ratings mean, Democrat held are for seats that, and Republican held that are already locked in. There's a lot more Democrats running for re-election. That's why the GOP has an inherent advantage in this map. Safe races are ones that are 95% plus chance to win, likely are 85% plus. Lean is 75% plus. Tilt is 65%. Toss-up is where neither side has at least a 65% chance of winning.
Got it. So let's go to the next part, and this is on the chance like you were talking about. This is the chance to win a Senate majority. So you actually have it relatively high, with 41.5%, and the projected seats won right now is 48.9 for Democrats, 51.1 for Republicans. 41 is higher, actually, than I've seen previously. So talk to us about the individual races where if we were to see a D win, what that would look like.
Yeah, I get a little queasy when my model's a little different from the conventional wisdom sometimes because I like to be right. But there's not many models like mine this time, but most of them, with one exception from Split Ticket, tend to show it around 35 to 42% chance for Dems. So I do think it's in play. So the reason why it's gotten more competitive is Nebraska, out of nowhere, appears to be on the political map. Now, I've never seen this big of a gap in my own forecast. The fundamentals of the race say the GOP is going to win the race by 30 points. The polling shows the independent candidate, who may or may not caucus with Democrats, Dan Osborne, leading by a little over 1%.
He's been on the show, too. He's an interesting character.
And we covered his race a year ago.
That's right, you did.
We're the first national press to take this race seriously. I think he probably does caucus with Democrats, but he can ask for the absolute world, like if he is the deciding vote. For him to matter, though, Republicans have to win Montana. So let's do Montana first. Like, John Tester has won 3 straight elections by 4 digits, right? Less than 5,000 votes, I think, each time. What's it looking like for him this time?
Yeah, what happened?
So he is down in the polls, not by that much, if you adjust for the fact that almost every single poll we have there is for Republican internal, and my model tends to think that if it's an internal from either party, you got to adjust heavily for bias. The limited non-internal polling hasn't been good for Tester, but there's so little of it, and it's mostly out of date that I feel like we're riding blind here. This is just a tough state to win. It's a lot more red than Ohio, right? So even though Tester's one of the strongest political candidates running in the country in terms of overperforming his state, he's got the tougher road to victory. I think he's got a shot, at least 35% chance right now.
The fact that he's not putting out internals suggests that maybe he doesn't have very good ones.
Yeah, he doesn't have internals that he's publishing.
Would he be putting, like, historically, has he put out internal polls to show that he's tight?
I don't believe so, and I don't think it's actually as important because he's going to get the funding. I'm sometimes surprised that of late there's some GOP firms that seem to think it really helps them to have all these internals that show their candidates ahead. I think it actually, if anything, hurts mildly. I don't think really it matters because the person that are going to decide to vote or not decide to vote, they're not looking at the polls.
Yeah, that's right.
So, okay, back to Nebraska then. So, very strong chance it all comes down to Nebraska.
I wouldn't go as far as that. I would say there's a small, maybe 5 to 10% chance it comes down to Nebraska.
Well, why is that? Because you've got Sherrod Brown probably going to win, right? Casey's going to win.
Sherrod Brown probably.
Well, see, that I want to focus on. Let's go to the next one because you have the individual chances there. And I want to talk through this because this is where it all matters. So Arizona, that looks like it's going to stay blue with Gallego. You've got Rick Scott up by some 3%.
Oh, this is just the polling, too.
Sorry, in the polling, in terms of their projected lead. But you have Montana there, she at plus 4.9, but here Osborne at 1.5. So in this scenario, like you were just saying, with Sherrod Brown, I'd be curious because I haven't seen as much focus on that. Sherrod Brown obviously is a strong Democratic candidate. This is what, an R+8 state or whatever, but you know, it's still, things are a lot more partisan and a lot tighter. And the Browns and the the Browns and the Montanas of the world, like it's a little bit more difficult this time around to actually hang on in those states. What do you think?
Yeah, well, just one quick. So I do think Nebraska that Fisher is favored. I think I have her up 7.
Okay.
But the reason I give such a chance of an upset is like there's this massive gap between the polling and the forecast, and that suggests there's something that could go wrong and raises the odds of an upset.
Right.
So in Ohio's case, Brown has led every poll, but I think 1 or 2, and he's led all the serious polls, or almost all the serious polls. One of which I think New York Times had him up 4. And I think the reason is, hey, Brown's a really good candidate that overperforms with white working class voters, there's a lot of them in Ohio. That's why Democrats have fallen way behind in Ohio, because that group has been moving towards Republicans fast.
That's right.
But Brown is a much better fundraiser than his opponent, which while the national GOP is coming in to help, that's a real sign he's running a better campaign. And he's also running against a guy that's a car dealer, that's kind of grumpy sometimes. He doesn't always come across as particularly warm and fuzzy.
Moreno. Right?
Moreno, I think he was by far the weakest candidate.
What's a grumpy car dealer?
Exactly. Of any of the primary candidates. And this is the problem that being a Republican, if you sign up for Donald Trump again, that's the cost you go for. Is Donald Trump would like to win the Senate, but above all else, he wants loyalty from the Senate. He saw the GOP senators that broke against him on impeachment, broke against him on many other things too. That was kind of the backbone of the GOP resistance, even though they were a lot more quiet about it than Adam Kinzinger. They constantly challenged him. And so his goal is to kind of reshape it in his image, so he's not choosing the best candidates.
What I remember reading also about Ohio is that Sherrod Brown is going hard on abortion, especially after that abortion referendum. So could you talk about abortion here on the Senate level? How much does that factor into the Gallego strength with the Arizona law? How much does it factor into Ohio and to the general statewide races that you're seeing?
It's definitely a helpful issue. It's not going to win the races alone, but if it can pass, if abortion referendums can pass even in very red Kansas by 20 points, they're going to pass in every state in the country except maybe Louisiana and Mississippi and maybe Alabama. So it's just become a real advantage issue for Democrats. I think Gallego, though, who's just dominating the polling.
Dominating.
I think there's 2 reasons. One, Gallego has a really compelling story. He came to the U.S. as an immigrant, slept on the floor, worked his way into Harvard, and rather than getting a lot of money, he served in the military. And then Lake used to be pretty even with voters back in 2022, but her years-long campaign to try to overturn the election, after a certain point, it just looked kind of silly, and no one liked hearing about Cyber Ninja and all this other stuff and it being a national story. You saw her favorable ratings hit the basement afterwards. They've recovered a little bit, but they're still really bad. I think this is a very different Kari Lake in terms of Arizona voters' perception than the razor-tight race in 2022.
Got it. And so overall, you look at the Senate. Texas, I forgot to ask. So there's a lot of hay being made right now in Washington, calling all red. There's Republicans who are backing him. You have it as likely red. I mean, I still think I'm from Texas. I still think Ted Cruz is probably going to win, but what explains the mania? Why are they hopeful this time around?
I think it's justified, not because he's necessarily favored, which I don't think, but because there's an argument to be made that Texas could continue to shift. I mean, the state voted, I think, 20 points for Romney, and then it voted 5.5 points for Trump in 2020, so it's moving at a pretty fast clip.
Yeah, it's changing a lot. Right.
So if it continues to have another jump like it did in 2020 to the left, and he just overperforms Harris by a few points, and she does well nationally and in Texas, or at least keeps it there, loses by 2 or less, I think it's possible. I think the other reason is, right, like just broadly speaking, if Democrats lose Montana, they have to win either Florida, Texas, or Nebraska. Yeah, the polling is good in Nebraska, but it's so unlikely that we're kind of just like waiting for the shoe to drop, and it may not happen.
I feel like it's more likely than Florida or Texas, though.
I was going to say, do you really think that Florida and Texas are more in play than Nebraska? I mean, those are just again, look, I could be wrong, but these are just locked in red states to me.
Well, Nebraska's like, 25 points to the right of the country?
True. I don't know.
So Florida and Texas used to be that state. It's now like 10 points in 2020 to the right. If it becomes like 6 points, 5 points, and Harris wins by 4 nationally, you could see it happening.
What about Omaha? Who's moving there? Are those right-wing Californians or left-wing Californians?
Or are they even Californians?
Are they Californians?
Who are they?
Who's leading to the growth in Omaha?
I actually don't know that off the top. That's a good
I haven't
question.
looked at the internal migration data.
But I'll tell you this.
If you live in Omaha, let us know.
I would say, one area that Democrats have struggled on a policy level in cities more than any other has been affordable housing.
Yes.
They're starting to shift and take it more seriously, but the bizarre, unexpected a huge upside for Democrats nationally is people keep moving to swing states because that's where a lot of the growth has been lately. That's what's making some of these states like Arizona into swing states.
New conspiracy theory just dropped.
What?
Democrats have pushed up housing prices to push their blue voters into swing states.
I don't even think that's a conspiracy theory. I think it's just actually true.
That's what happened.
That's what's
it doesn't mean that
happening.
On the system is what it does.
So I wanted to ask you about split ticket voters. That was another thing. So Gallego up by 8, but then I see Trump. How much is Trump up in your forecast in Arizona? Or
I think in the projection, it's like 1.5 points. Polling might be about the same.
Okay, so do you really believe 10% of the electorate are split ticket voters? Yeah, I just find it crazy.
Well, I'm not going to say with confidence because these things can always be off, right?
Yeah.
They're going to be off in some direction.
Right.
But yeah, I think voters we were at a historical low point in 2020 in terms of split ticket voters. An object in motion in politics doesn't always stay in motion, right?
Yeah, right.
That's a really low point, and it kind of makes sense. It could return to the norm a little bit. We saw in 2022 in particular, candidates who are not named Donald Trump that have a record of trying to overturn elections. Boy, voters don't like that.
Congratulations to Kari Lake of being the candidate who people are like, Trump, I'm all right with.
Right, but not
Kari Lake, wow.
I can't deal with that. Yeah, it is fast. So the Gallego Trump voter, you think it's real? You think it's very real?
Yeah, I mean, especially if Trump is gaining a bit with Latinos, which, to be fair, in Arizona, he didn't do as much in 2020.
Yeah, he did not.
We'll see if it happens in 24, but Gallego makes sense that as a guy who grew up in poverty, and there's a lot of first, second, third generation immigrants from Mexico as well there, that he could do better because, boy, is his story compelling, and they can see themselves or their parents or their grandparents in it.
All right, well, we'll see. Logan, I always love talking to you, man. You're such a great wealth of information. Race to the White House, is it .org or .com? I forget.
.com.
.com. All right, racetothewhitehouse.com. We'll have a link down in the description. We love having a partnership with you, so we will see you soon.
Hey, great to be on again. Love being on, too. See you soon.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show, ad-free, and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.